Can you folks see my slideshow?
Yes, Maharaj.
Okay, thank you. I hate that I always have to ask, but I just don't trust anything anymore. Not with me. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Ancha Kalpatarunyascha Kripa Sindho Deva Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namaha. Good morning or afternoon or evening, depending, I guess, on where we are in the world. Um, this is part 9 of our exploration of Sharanagati, the path of accepting shelter. And today we'll take a look at the anga referred to in the verse that we use as Atma Nikshepa, complete self-surrender. So we'll start as usual with the verse itself that tells us these 6 angas, the 6 aspects or facets or limbs of taking shelter of Krishna. Anukulyasya sankalpaha pratikulyasya varjanam rakshishyatiti vishvaso gopkrite varanam atmani chepakarpanyesha pudha sharanagati. So these 6 things are aspects of surrendering, taking shelter of the Lord's lotus feet. Accepting things that are favorable for the culture of bhakti, rejecting things that are unfavorable, being convinced that Krishna can protect us in all circumstances, accepting the Lord as our exclusive guardian or master, provider even, full self-surrender and humility. So today we'll talk about this Atma Nikshepa. And if we are curious about what that means, and how that's distinct from any of the others, well, the distinction is not terribly clear. They all sort of, the different aspects all sort of run into each other in a number of ways. But at the beginning of his chapter on Atma Nikshepa, Srila Sridhar Maharaj has these 3 couplets to explain just what we mean when we talk about Atma Nikshepa. He says, to summarily offer everything, from the body and its paraphernalia all the way to the pure soul, unto the lotus feet of Sri Hari, is known as Atma Nikshepa, or full self-surrender. All selfish pursuits are abandoned, and every endeavor is for Krishna alone. And that too, up to the point of completely depending on Krishna for one's personal needs and ends. Having thus cast oneself unto the holy lotus feet of one's Lord, one can never be swayed from that position, and he engages in pure devotional service with all his heart forever. So what we mean when we talk about full self-surrender is full self-surrender, offering everything, from our body, all the things that are associated with the body, all the way to the soul, in the service of the Lord. Srila Sridhar Maharaj says here, all selfish pursuits are abandoned, um, and it also means um, all selfish conceptions, all selfish, I just lost the word, um, anything that's focused on me, serving me, all senses of who we um, are completely abandoned, and everything is dedicated to Krishna. Just as we see in the Tridandi sannyasis, um, they carry the danda, the staff, made of 3 rods bound together. Actually, we use 4. And the 3 rods um, symbolize the sannyasi's dedication of all his or her assets to the service of the Lord: body, thought, and speech. And we add a 4th um, to um, to symbolize this dedication of our very soul, simply for the service of Mukunda Krishna. So this is this. It can sound a little scary, and we don't really see a lot in the verses that we might use to illustrate these, um, to, uh, to soften that. It's intense. Complete self-surrender is an intense thing. Now, here in the verse, the word we have is Atmanikshepa, but we also see this referred to as Atmanivedana and Atma Samarpana. So I thought it would serve us well to take a couple of minutes just to take a look at these 3 different terms. And these translations are all from Monier Williams' 1899 Sanskrit English Dictionary. And this is the dictionary that Srila Prabhupada used to help him with his translating work. And actually, used to have a copy of the dictionary he used here in Honolulu. It was sitting up in Srila Prabhupada's room, and it was there for anything to happen to. And it was actually quite worn and falling apart, Indian binding, And so I took charge of that dictionary, and I actually had it rebound. We had a friend here in Honolulu, a fellow by the name of Jesus Sanchez, who's a world famous bookbinder. He's very well known for his beautiful and very durable hand binding of books. So I had him rebind that book. He offered to do it as service, and took care of it for a while. And then they asked for it to be sent back here to the temple, and I did. I complied. It's not my dictionary after all. So I did. And when I got back here year before last, I found that dictionary is not here anymore. So I had to let go of that as well. So we have 3 terms: Nivedana, Samarpana, and Nikshepa. Nivedana, Monier Williams says, means delivering, entrusting, offering, or dedicating. So we can see how those different senses of Nivedana all might apply to this particular anga of bhakti. Samarpana, Atma Samarpana. Samarpana, he says, means delivering or handing completely over, consigning, presenting, imparting, or bestowing. And Nikshepa, very interesting, putting down, abandoning, throwing away, or sending away. Throwing away. It's just, I remember a few years ago asking a friend of mine in Alachua, Pundarik Vidyamidi, what sense he had of the word Nikshepa. And he said, casting away, throwing away. So this gives us a sense of parityajya that we see at the end of the Bhagavad Gita, or prauchita, that we see at the very beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam, completely giving up. So we don't have anything to do with it anymore. Just as we looked last week at Goptritve Varanam, we have it's like when you give away or sell one of your domestic animals or your car. In our experience, it's probably, you may be more familiar with selling a car or selling a house. And if we, when we own the car, or when we live in the house, when we own the house, we're always concerned about everything going wrong. Are there leaks in the roof? Is the air conditioning working okay? How's the plumbing? Does it need a new exterior paint job? Do I need, everything? The bathroom sink, the toilets work, everything. Same thing with the car. If it gets a scratch on it, we might get upset because of our sense of identifying with the car. But once we've sold the car or sold the house and something happens to it, we don't have that same, our heart doesn't crack because we don't feel invested in those things anymore. We don't, the attachment is broken. So this, I like the idea of putting down, abandoning, throwing, sending away, Atmani Chepa, but also Atma Samarpana and Atmani Nivedana all carry the same thing with a, I think with a little more positive thing, because then there's an object. We deliver our ego, our body, our mind, our speech, we deliver or dedicate, offer those to the Lord, consign them, turn them over, present them, bestow them to the Lord. Because after all, they do comfort. And I will be sharing a lot of these verses that we'll be looking at. I've taken from Srila Sridhar Maharaj's Sri Prabhupada Jivanamrita, not all of them, but many of them, maybe even most of them, you'd be able to find there. And so here, again, we see the tie between self-dedication, self-sacrifice, and abandoning all senses of self that aren't directly connected with Krishna. So he has a verse, he includes a verse from a text called Sri Hari Bhakti Kalpa Latika. As far as I know, we don't have an author. We don't know who the author of this text is. But we do know that it was printed in Bengali several times by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So we accept it as authorized. And here we see a very Srila Sridhar Maharaj translation of this verse, Krishnaya Arpita Dehasya Nirmamasya Ahamkriti Manasas Tatswarupatvam Smritamatma. So here we have Atma Nivedana. Self-dedication as self-sacrifice is how Srila Sridhar Maharaj characterizes this. So he says, of one who out of love for Krishna has died to live exclusively for the Lord's service, who is devoid of attachment for any other objective, and who is free from egotism. His godly mentality, or absence of pursuit of personal pleasure in quest of the Lord's pleasure, is known as Atma Nivedana, self-sacrifice. So again, we see the same high bar. We don't see any softening of the standard. Now, when we get to the end, there's an interesting verse, a couple of verses from Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita that we can discuss, and we can see that this is actually a process. I think we can find some encouragement in reminding ourselves of that. Um, that the process of surrender, the process of taking shelter, is a process, which means it's progressive. We start where we are, and each day we hope we make a little progress in that process. We come closer and a little closer each day to that shelter of Lord Krishna's lotus feet. So although the bar may seem pretty high, this is our goal. Guru Maharaj has suggested that, of course, we know that the goal of bhakti is prema. The goal of sadhana bhakti is bhava, and the goal of bhava bhakti is prema. But Tripurari Maharaj has suggested many times that sadhakas might see Sharanagati as a sort of interim goal. And so this is something that we can actually kind of gauge each day. It takes a little introspection, but that's a desirable thing anyway. Then he cites a verse from Kulashekar Alvar, sometimes referred to as King Kulashekar. I've included in these verses, as following Srila Sridhar Maharaj, verses from Kulashekar and verses from Yamuna Acharya, which shows, I think shows how Sharanagati or Sharanapati is not an exclusively Gaudiya thing. It's a Vaishnava thing. And for the Sri Vaishnavas, this is their whole process. They actually equate Sharanagati with bhakti. And so they have quite a few texts exploring Sharanapati. And so Kulashekar Alvar, he was one of the 12 Alvars, maybe 9th century. I think he was 9th century. The Alvars, who were Sri Vaishnavati poets and sages, they ranged over a few hundred years. And I think Kulashekar was about 9th century. He was a king in Kerala, and eventually he abandoned his throne and went to Sri Rangam and dedicated everything to the Lord, and traveled and taught. So he says, Yat kritam yat karishyami tat sarvam maya kritam tvaya kritam tu palab tvameva madhusudana. So this is the perspective of the surrendered soul, the dedicated soul. And again, we can go back to our very first session, where we find ourselves reminded by Srila Sridhar Maharaj that what we're talking about, when we're talking about bhakti, and especially when we're talking about Sharanagati, it's not so much renunciation as dedication. He suggests 3 planes of existence. One is the exploitative plane, which characterizes karma, the realm of karma. The other is the renounced, the renounced plane, rejecting everything. That's the plane of seeking liberation, just freedom. And then there's the dedicated plane, which is the realm of bhakti. So the perspective of the dedicated soul, the surrendered soul, is he is just an instrument in the hands of the Supreme Lord. One place where we can see this, well, let's take a look at the verse first. O Madhusudana, whatever I have done and whatever I will do, nothing is my endeavor. It is all done by you, and you alone are the enjoyer of the fruit. This is complete self-surrender. This is what dedication looks like. And we see this in Srila Prabhupada's character, for sure. We certainly see it in the prayers that he wrote on the Jaladuta. The prayer to the lotus feet of Lord Krishna that he wrote in the middle of the ocean. Krishna Tava Punya Habe Pai, E Punya Kodi Vijabi, Radha Krishna. Radha Krishna, oh, I just lost it. Anyway, Srila Prabhupada strikes a deal essentially with Krishna. He's admitting his utter lack of qualification to carry out the enormous task that he felt he'd been charged with by his spiritual master. Many of his godbrothers admitted that they saw the every town and village assertion of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as perhaps a little hyperbolic. After all, it's poetry, and hyperbole is one of the ornaments of poetry. So maybe every town and village is a little much. But Srila Prabhupada took it very seriously, and he knew that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had said, as Srila Sridhar Maharaj shared with us, that if he had another 10 years to live, he would like to spend it in New York City. So Srila Prabhupada, he worked very hard. He spent years translating the first canto of the Bhagavatam, and then when he had that in hand, he started making a plan to come to the United States. And so we know the story, how he staged practically a sit-down strike outside Mrs. Morarji's office. Mata Morarji was she was the head of the India steamship line, one of the big shipping lines in the world. And she was also a Vaishnava. She was a Pushtimar Vaishnava. And so Srila Prabhupada appealed to her, bullied her in a way. He simply wouldn't let her say no. And then on the boat in the middle of the ocean, he wrote this appeal to Krishna. This is crazy. This is impossible. I can't do this. I'm just a small man and a beggar at that. I have no assets. I have no money. Nobody knows who I am. Nobody knows anything about what I'm trying to do. But he says, you are the wisest of all. You could make this happen. And he, at Boston Harbor, he said, I'm simply a puppet in your hands. And this is just what we see here. He sees himself simply as an instrument in the Lord's hands. I'm simply a puppet in your hands. If you brought me here to dance, then make me dance as you like. So this is the perspective of the Sharanagata that Kula Shekhar shares in his Hindu study. This is Prahlad Maharaj from the 7th canto of the Bhagavatam. So Prahlad prays, Dharmartha Kama Itiyo Bhitas Trivarga Iksha Trainaya Dhamma Vividha Chavarta Manye Tade Tat Akilam Nigamasya Satyam Svatmarpanam Swasubhita Paramasya Pumsaha. So Swa Atma Atmarpanam. It says religion, economic development, and sense gratification are celebrated as the three means of attaining the path of salvation. Of these, Iksha Trayi especially, knowledge of the self, knowledge of fruitive acts and logic, and also politics and economics. They're all different means of livelihood. All of these are different subjects of Vedic education, and therefore I consider them temporary engagements. On the other hand, surrendering unto the Supreme Lord Vishnu is factual gain in life, and I consider that the ultimate truth. So here we see Prahlad Maharaj directly addressing Atma Samarpana, or Atma Arpana, completely dedicating ourselves to the service of the Lord. Now, I've mentioned that in connection with Tridandi Sannyas and in the Danda itself. But Srila Prabhupada said on a number of occasions that this self-dedication of body, thought, and speech, work, words, and thought. This isn't limited to people who, wear funny orange clothes and carry this bamboo staff. This is, to the extent that any of us is engaged in dedicating our work, words, and speech to the service of the Lord, as well as our very self, our soul. To that extent, he said that we are considered sannyasis, regardless of our dress or whether we have interesting sannyas name or not. So he says that everything that we use as a means of livelihood, he considers them temporary engagements. So these are kind of like nimitta dharma. They have a cause and they have a goal, but that's within this world. Speaking last night on the Nectar of Devotion in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu with another group, and we I just lost my train of thought now. Anyway, there was something connected, and I just lost it as I was trying to place it. I apologize. This is Madhavendra Puri. I've got a couple of verses by Madhavendra Puri, and these are a little familiar. This verse from Prahlad and these two verses from Madhavendra Puri, these are all cited by Srila Prabhupada in the purport to a verse in I think the 4th chapter of Canto 2 of Srimad Bhagavatam. Might be there at the very beginning of the chapter. Might be the 3rd and 4th verses, if I remember correctly. So these are a little familiar. Again, just as Prahlad, we see Madhavendra Puri considering everything other than service to the Lord as temporary endeavors, things that are okay, but not my real business. So he says, "Oh, my evening prayer, all good unto you. Oh, my morning bath, I bid you goodbye. Oh, demigods and forefathers, please excuse me. I'm unable to perform any more offerings for your pleasure. Now I've decided to free myself from all reactions to sins, simply by remembering anywhere and everywhere the great descendant of Yadu and the great enemy of Kamsa, Lord Krishna. I think that this is sufficient for me. So what is the use of further endeavors?" Oh, I know, I just remembered. We were talking about, there's a discussion at the end of the discussion of the 64 Angas of Bhakti, and there's some discussion of the place of Varnashram Dharma, because there's a verse, Varnashrama Charavata, that's often cited to show how Varnashram is an integral or essential part of Bhakti. And so the verse says that the only way to please Vishnu is by following your duties according to Varnashram Dharma. And Rupa Goswami and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur soundly reject this. They point out that the Varnashram Dharma is for those who don't have any attachment to Bhakti. So to the extent that we don't have attachment for Bhakti, we have to carry out our duties in this world. And we also see at the beginning of the Bhagavatam that if we don't have that attachment to hearing about Krishna and his transcendental qualities and pastimes, then even if we perform our varnashram duties perfectly, the Bhagavatam characterizes that as shrama eva hi keva, complete waste of time, nothing but a waste of time. So here, Madhavendra Puri is expressing the same conviction. I was going to say sentiment, but this is stronger even than that. He's expressing the same conviction that all my duties, all the duties that I have in the world, including, my evening prayers, my morning bath, all these things are secondary. They're all useful only to the extent that they facilitate my service to Krishna. Otherwise, what's the point? I'm simply, my business is simply remembering Krishna. And we see that in at the beginning of that second chapter of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, that all the rules and prohibitions of the scriptures, all the vidhis and nishetas, they're all subservient to two principles: always remember Krishna and never forget Krishna. So this is Madhavendra Puri's conviction that everything else is useless if it doesn't help me remember Krishna. So I want to remember Krishna. If having to engage in Sandhya Vandana gets in the way of my remembering Krishna, having to take a bath, if having to worship the demigods and the forefathers, all these things, if any of these things interferes at all with my always remembering Krishna and never forgetting Krishna, then I cast them away. Oh, and then this one is also familiar to many of us. Madhavendra Puri says, "Let the sharp moralist accuse me of being illusioned. I do not mind. Experts in Vedic activities may slander me as being misled. Friends and relatives may call me frustrated. My brothers may call me a fool. The wealthy Mammonites may point me out as mad, and the learned philosophers may assert that I am much too proud. Still, my mind does not budge an inch from the determination to serve the lotus feet of Govinda, though I be unable to do it." So this means abandoning even any attachment to our reputation as an intelligent, responsible citizen. And this is a very, as I mentioned before, this is a particularly high bar because we don't want to be seen as crazy people. To the extent that we're rooted at all in this world, this is an important thing to us. We don't want to be seen as crazy. So sometimes, you'll see the devotees prefer to chant japa alone because they simply want to focus and they want to let the japa take them where it will. Or same thing with kirtan. And so many of us try to keep ourselves a little contained in public. Of course, for most of us, it's not hard. Folks like me, it's not particularly hard to do that because there's not that much to contain. But here, Madhavendra Puri has abandoned even his repute as a normal human being. So he says, let the moralists talk. Let them say I'm degraded. Whatever. The big Vedic pundits may say I'm being misled. Friends and relatives may call me frustrated that I just haven't been able to make it in this world, so therefore I'm taking to bhakti. You see that in Jaiva Dharma when what's his name? Lahiri Mahashai. He's a famous singer and landowner. He's from Shantipur. He's from Advaita Acharya's village. When he goes to Godruma, and joins with the Babajis in pursuing a life of bhajan. Um, uh, on the pretext of going, somewhere for a little vacation, maybe go to like going to one of those devotees go to India to these Ayurvedic spas for panchakarma and stuff like that. So on the plea of doing something like that, he ends up with the Babajis at Godrumatwi, and his wife and sons, they're not sure where he is or what he's up to, and then his wife starts hearing gossip from the other ladies at the well or in the market that Lahiri Mahashai, gone to Godruma and he's hanging out with these crazy people, all these bhabukas, um, and so he's apparently lost his mind, or he's just become frustrated with material life or whatever. And so finally they send one of the sons to try to talk him into coming back, keeping up with his bhajan, but at least living at home, so that everybody doesn't just think that the family, that he and the whole family have completely lost it, or maintain some position in society. And he frankly doesn't care for that anymore. He's too attached to the good association of the other Vaishnavas. Or when the same fellow later, after taking initiation and becoming a Dvaitadas Babaji, he is visited by an old school friend who has become a big shot in society, and he was looking at him, sitting around like with wearing a loincloth, and your head shaved with this top knot, and you got a basket of tulsi beads around your neck. You don't know how to behave. You don't know how to dress anymore. And Advaita Das Babaji starts thinking to himself, okay, how do I upset this guy and make it go away so he can leave me alone and I can go back to my chanting. So completely rejecting even any sense of personal repute, our sense of who we are in the world, completely gone. And here's Jamuna Acharya again. We've seen him in previous weeks. And Srila Sridhar Maharaj characterizes this as the transcendental pure soul's realization of his capacity to offer himself to the Lord. Somehow or other, we have to completely offer ourselves to the Lord. So Jamuna Acharya prays, Vapuradi Shudyo Piko Piva, Gunato Sani Yata Tata Vidha, Tadaham Tavapada Padmayo, Raham Adjaiva Maya Samarpita. Again, Samarpita, Atma Samarpita. He says, however I may be materially designated, however my character may be known, now, O Lord, this whole sense of ego is offered by me unto your holy lotus feet. So here we see that sense of dedication. He's not just throwing it away, but he's actually offering it to the Lord. Whatever they think of me, whatever my position might be in society, I offer that to you. And there are different ways to do this. When we live in society, when we live as householders, a householder needs to have a reputation. A householder needs to be taken seriously as a responsible member of society, so that they can make a living, so they can support their family, maintain their household, and make some contribution to society along the way. So the way that we offer our position there is by using that, so that people will see, oh, so and so is a devotee of Krishna. It's like I used to be an English professor. So when people, I never made it a point of saying that I was a devotee of Krishna. It wasn't anybody's business, and I thought I was especially I was a little vulnerable because I worked for many years with non-tenure track jobs. I had jobs teaching at universities and community colleges with 2 and 3 year contracts. And if I were seen to be too weird, I was afraid that they might find some excuse to not renew my contract. So, you know, at the same time, if it ever came up, I never denied it. I remember being confronted once. I was talking with a group of students after class. This was at Mesa College in San Diego. And all of a sudden, one of the young women in the group that I was speaking with looked at me and she said, "Are you a Hare Krishna?" And I thought, wow, what's that about? You know, I wore neck beads, I guess. Um, I just looked at her and I said, "Well, why would you ask that?" And she said, "Well, do you know Robert?" And she was talking about Badri Narayan, who was the one of the main leader in San Diego in Prabhupada's Discipline Society there, still is. And and, and and I said, "Well, yes, I do. As a matter of fact, how do you know him?" And she said, "Oh, his daughter Anasuya is my best friend." And then I realized who this girl was, who this young woman was. She was a friend of Anasuya's and also a friend of my older daughter Krishna Mai's, who just had never met me. And everybody knew Krishna Mai. Everybody at her high school knew that Krishna Mai was a devotee, including the janitors, I think, even. And but I just never made a thing of it. But when it came up, I just always said, "Yep," because it was also not a big secret. So I would try to use the fact that I had a responsible position in society, and sometimes when I spoke at programs at the temple or sponsored by the temple, I would be introduced as someone who teaches English at San Diego State and Mesa College or whatever other colleges I taught at the time. So that's how we dedicate all those things as householders. And when we accept another station in life, then we do it by abandoning them, giving up our attachment to them altogether. Now, this is Rukmini. This is from the 10th canto of the Bhagavatam, and this is a verse from Rukmini's letter. Rukmini was the chief of Krishna's wives in Dwarka, his 16,108 wives. And Rukmini had been betrothed by her father to, because of some political entanglements, uh, to Shishupal, not a friend of Krishna's, and not somebody to whom Rukmini would ever be able to take a shine, or someone for whom she would ever be able to feel any affection, because she was complete. She had given her heart completely to Krishna just by having heard about him. This is a significant thing, I think, for us. Um, we may not have actually met Krishna yet, but we've heard about Krishna from his devotees. So Rukmini, her love for Krishna blossomed just by hearing about him. And when she was just on the verge of being married, I mean, she's already engaged in a particular ceremony as preparation for the wedding. She wrote a letter to Krishna imploring him to come and kidnap her so that they could be married in the manner of what is called the Rakshasa Vivaha, the way of the Rakshasas, that Rakshasas marry ladies by kidnapping, just like Ravana tried to do with Sita. So she writes, "Therefore, my dear Lord, I have chosen you as my husband," this is after glorifying Krishna, "and I surrender myself to you. Please come swiftly, O Almighty One, and make me your wife. My dear lotus-eyed Lord, let Shishupal never touch the hero's portion like a jackal stealing the property of a lion." So here she's offering herself, body and soul, to Krishna. And she's asking him, take me now, strike now, because the opportunity, the opportunity may be lost at any moment. So this, I find this particularly significant. This is a very Rukmini, a very surrendered soul. She's actually Krishna's internal Shakti, Swarup Shakti. So she's like the personification of surrender to Krishna. And then we have, this is Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu immersed in the sentiments of Srimati Radharani. And as we recognize, this is the last of the Shikshastakam. This is text 8 of the Shikshastakam. And if we read Guru Maharaj's book, and which incorporates the commentaries of several of our previous acharyas on the Shikshastakam and offers some insights of his own, we see that we understand that the Shikshastakam builds as it was organized in the last chapter of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita by Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. We find the verses, Mahaprabhu's verses, in throughout Rupa Goswami's Padyavali, but they're arranged thematically, I guess, in a different way. They aren't arranged in the order that we're accustomed to hearing them. So Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, who had for many years studied under all the Goswamis of Vrindavan. He studied under Rupa Goswami, who compiled the Padyavali, and Sanatan Goswami, who was the leader of the Goswamis, as well as Gopal Bhatta, Raghunath Das, and Gopal Bhatta Goswami, and Bhugarba Goswami and Lokanath Goswami. So he studied under all the 8 Goswamis of Vrindavan. And so his arranging these in this order isn't any kind of accident. This is informed by his many, many years of close association with Rupa Sanatan and the other Goswamis. And so this is the apex. This is Radharani. This is the kind of thinking that drove Mahaprabhu mad as he lived alone in the Gambhira at the home of Kashi Mishra, I think. And so this is the ultimate. This is Radharani's deepest sentiment. Ashtashiva padaratam vinishtamam, darshanam marma hatam karotu va, yata tata va vidhatu lampado matprananatas tu saevanam. I have 3 translations here. One is the translation that we find at the end of Srila Prabhupada's introduction to Srimad Bhagavatam, the one that kind of became part of the DNA, I guess, of so many of the devotees from our first days in Krishna consciousness, going back some of us to the 60s. I know no one but Krishna as my Lord, and he shall remain so, even if he handles me roughly in his embrace or makes me broken-hearted by not being present before me. He is completely free to do anything and everything, for he is always my worshipful Lord unconditionally. The second translation is from where we find the verse in chapter 20 of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. So this is also Srila Prabhupada's translation. Sometimes devotees will object to presenting a verse differently from what they have seen in the Bhagavad Gita as it is, or in Srimad Bhagavatam or Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. But we can understand from Srila Prabhupada's own example that there are different ways to read, that we can put the words, the verses in different words when we translate. Translating is part art, part science, and part magic. Um, so there Srila Prabhupada writes, let Krishna tightly embrace this maidservant. So he's becoming more explicit, right, about just what mood is being conveyed here, who and whose mood. Let Krishna tightly embrace this maidservant who has fallen at his lotus feet, or let him trample me, or break my heart by never being visible to him. He is a debauchee after all, and can do whatever he likes, but still, he alone, and no one else, is the worshipable Lord of my heart. So in the old translation, the 1959 translation, we don't see direct reference to Lampata. There's this kind of indirect reference, breaking heart, breaking my heart, etc. But here here he says the interesting part out loud. He is a debauchee after all, and he's going to do what he's going to do. I mean, that's what she's saying. He's going to do what he's going to do, and whatever it is fine with me. There's nothing I can do about it. I belong to him, 108%. And then the last translation is Guru Maharaj's, Tripurari Maharaj's from the Shikshastakam of Sri Chaitanya. He may embrace me, devoted as I am to his feet, or he may torment me, break my heart by hiding from me. Being a playboy, he is free to do whatever he likes, for he alone is the Lord of my life. So this is, of course, this is the bar set as high as it could possibly be set. Srimati Radharani's complete surrender, complete abandonment of all self-interest, simply for the interest of the Lord. It's just, this is how Srila Prabhupada sometimes describes this Atma Nivedana or Atma Chepa, Atma Samarpana. Complete abandonment of any interest of our own, simply for the interest of the Lord. And then, this is also Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. This is elsewhere in Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. This is chapter 13 of Madhya Lila. Srila Sridhar Maharaj calls this text the vivid revelation of the treasure within the identity of pure ego and self-dedication. That's just kind of extraordinary. This is the treasure. This is what we find when we when our ego, when our very ego, our very sense of self is completely dedicated to the service of Krishna. And we see in Chaitanya Charitamrita, this verse comes as Lord Chaitanya is dancing and singing in ecstasy in the Rath Yatra festival. And the verse just before this is a verse, very famous verse. Jayati Jananivaso Devaki Janavado Jadavada Parishatsvaito Viras Asyanatharman. This is Lord Chaitanya worshiping Lord Jagannath as Krishna, the Lord of the Gopis. And then after that, Krishnadas Kaviraj has him singing this verse. Naham Vipro Nachanarapatir Napi Vaishana Shudro Naham Varni Nachagrapatir Navanastoyatiha Inchuprodya Nikila Paramananda Purnamikapir Gopi Parti Padakamalaya Dasa Dasa Anudasa. I am not a Brahmin. I am not a Kshatriya, not a Vaishya or a Shudra, nor am I a Brahmachari, a householder, a Vanaprastha, or a sannyasi. I identify myself only as the servant of the servant of the servants of the lotus feet of Lord Krishna, the maintainer of the gopis. He's like an ocean of nectar, and he is the cause of transcendental bliss. He is always existing with brilliance. This is Mahaprabhu completely abandoning all sense of self, other than service to Krishna. Sometimes we'd hear that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati would be asked if he had ever seen Krishna. He says, I don't know, I wasn't looking for Krishna. I'm simply looking for service to Krishna. This is the identity that we should assume, that we should immerse ourselves in. And then I included these verses from the Antya-lila of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. This is chapter 4. This is Lord Chaitanya speaking with Sanatana Goswami. Now this, the clock here. The story is, for those of us who may not remember or may not have had a chance to read this yet, this is early in the Antya-lila. Sanatana Goswami has come to Puri to see, spend some time with Lord Chaitanya. But while traveling through the Jarikhanda forest, because of drinking some bad water or something, he's contracted a disease that has his body covered with oozing sores. And he doesn't want to get near the devotees, the other servants of Lord Jagannath, because he sees his body as contaminated and disgusting. And he certainly doesn't want to go and see the Lord, because he remembers at every meeting, the Lord was so affectionate to him that he would throw those long arms of his around Sanatana and draw him to his breast in a long, tight embrace. And he didn't want to contaminate the Lord's transcendental body. So he stayed away. He stayed with Haridas Thakur, away from Lord Jagannath's temple. So, because he wouldn't come see the Lord came to see him. And he told Haridas, this guy's a cheater. This guy's a cheater. He's given his life to me, and now he wants to throw it away. Because he was able to discern that Sanatana had devised a plan to give up that body by throwing it under the Rath Yatra cart as a sort of spiritual suicide. And so, he's complaining to Haridas at first, what is this guy's problem? He's given his life to me, and now he wants to take it back. That's just not right. And then he looked at Sanatana and he explained to him that I've got things I want to do with this body of yours. And along the way, he says these three, and I'm citing the 3 verses because, well, you see, Prabhu kahe, Vaishnava deha prakrita kabunai, aprakrita deha bhaktir chidananda. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, the body of a devotee is never material. It is to be considered transcendental, full of spiritual bliss. Diksha kale bhakta kore atma samarpana. There we go, atma samarpana. Se kale Krishna tari kore atma sam. At the time of initiation, when a devotee fully surrenders to the service of the Lord, that Krishna accepts him to be as good as himself. Krishna accepts that devotee's body. And we see that in the context that he's accepting the body as being as good as his own as well. And then he says, Se deha koretar chidanandam, aprakrita dehi talma, chodanampuja. When the devotee's body is thus transformed into spiritual existence, the devotee in that transcendental body renders service to the lotus feet of the Lord. So the point that Lord Chaitanya is making here is that the result of dedication is that even our body becomes spiritualized to the extent that we've dedicated it to the Lord's service. So he said, and he uses this phrase Chidanandamoy twice in these 3 verses to describe the devotee's body. So Srila Prabhupada translates the 3rd one, text 93, is when the devotee's body is thus transformed into spiritual existence, the devotee in that transcendental body is able to render service to the Lord. So we needed a spiritual body to engage in spiritual activity. But what he's talking about here is not the Siddha Deha or the perfected spiritual body, but the Sadhaka Deha. So he's making a point that if we're surrendered to Krishna, then our body belongs to Krishna and we have to take care of it. Just like if we are using a car that belongs to the mission, we understand this is Krishna's car I need to make sure that I get the oil changed every 3,000 or 5,000 miles. I need to get a tune-up every once in a while. I need to have the spark plugs changed, etc. So Lord Chaitanya is telling him, he's reminding him, you dedicated your body to me. And so he says that Diksha Kale Bhakta Kore Atma Samadhi, Say Kale Krishna Tale Kore Atma Samadhi, that at least to the extent that you're surrendered to the Lord, Krishna accepts even your body as being as good as his own, being completely composed of spiritual substance, just as we see at the beginning of the very beginning of the seventh canto of the Bhagavatam, where I think it's Narada Muni speaking to Yudhishthira, and he tells him, you know, those two cousins of yours, by the way, those two cousins of yours, Dantavakra and Shishupal again, those fellows used to live in the spiritual world with Lord Narayan. And Yudhishthira says, wait, no, that's impossible. That's the word he uses. It's not possible. He says, because their bodies there, everyone there is composed entirely of spiritual substance. So it's not possible for them to fall down. So then Narada Muni explains, actually, that's right. But here, this is a special case, simply for Leela. And then the song. I always try to share one of Bhaktivinoda Thakur's songs from the chapter on the particular anga of Sharanagati. And this, I've chosen Manasa Deha Geha. I tried again to find a kirtan with Agni Dev singing either this or Amana Dormati, which he sings a lot. He sings these both a lot. And I spent some time last evening looking on YouTube trying to find one of those kirtan festivals where Agni Dev, because he always likes to sing a bhajan, gives him a chance to give a class on philosophy. And so he and also it gives him a chance to share those moods of the acharyas with the devotees who were chanting. I chose Manasa Deha Geha because it's probably most familiar to many of us. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur sings, Manasa Deha Geha Jo Kichu More Arpinum Tu Apadi Nanda Kishore. Mind, body, family, whatever else is mine, I have surrendered at your lotus feet, O youthful son of Nanda. This is what we've seen throughout our exploration this morning, right? Mind, body, family, whatever else, anything that's connected with them, anything that I have any connection with, I offer that at your lotus feet in service. Sampade vipade jivane marane dvaya mama gela tua upade. In good fortune and in bad, in life and death, may all my difficulties have absconded by accepting those feet of yours as my shelter. Slay me or protect me as you wish. Right? Slay me or protect me as you wish, for you have ownership of your eternal servant. Janmao bimoy itcha jarito, bhakta grihe janin janmahalmo. If it is your will that I be born again, he's not even asking to be liberated. If you want me to be born again, then please let that birth be in the home of your devotee. Kita janmahao jata tuadas, pahimukha brahma janmi nahiash. May I even take birth as a worm, as long as I remain your devotee. I have no desire for birth as a Brahma. That would be a verse to you. Mukti spriha bihina jay bhakta, lapoite ta sangha anurakta. I yearn for the association of that devotee who's completely devoid of all desires for worldly enjoyment and liberation. Janaka janani daita tanai, prabhu guru pati tuhu sarvamai. Father, mother, beloved son, lord, preceptor, and husband, You are everything to me. Right? It sings elsewhere, Krishna Mata, Krishna Pita, Krishna Brahma. Bhakti Vinod Kohe Shunakan, Radha Nata Tuhum Hamara Para. Bhakti Vinod says, O Kana, please hear me, O Lord of Radha. You are my very life and soul. That's what I have for today. I apologize for running over. I thought maybe I would be able to do this in time. But I guess we should adjourn, unless somebody has something that I need to clarify now. Otherwise, if there is further discussion of these things, this, if everything goes right, if I don't find something else to do wrong this time, we this will be posted to the Sri Chaitanya Sangha group or page.
Tattva Viveka.
Oh, Tattva Viveka, thank you. Tattva Viveka, which I need to visit more. I try to spend as little time on Facebook as possible, but when I go there, I need to make sure I visit Tattva Viveka. So does anybody have anything that needs to be addressed now? Okay. Thank you all so much for your association and for engaging me in this service. This is actually Guru Maharaj and Padmanabha Maharaj's mercy that I've been pressed into doing this service, and it's helping me get an old project and scrape off some of the rust and try to get it going. So we'll see you again next week, hopefully with a little humility, because that'll be our theme. Sharanagati ki jai, Samaveta Gaura, Bhaktivinoda ki jai.
Sripad Bhakti Abhay Ashram Maharaj